The sprawling research station on Vexoria hummed with activity. Set against the backdrop of an alien world, the station's metallic walls gleamed under the red-hued sky. Outside, the planet's atmosphere trembled with the sounds of distant storms, but inside, the walls were alive with the rush of footfalls and the flicker of holograms. Sam Rook stood in the middle of the bustling hub, his eyes locked on the holoprojector displaying the image of Professor Zorek, the elderly Saurian anthropologist. Zorek's voice dripped with condescension, the kind that had become all too familiar to Sam over the last few weeks. The alien professor was speaking to a gathering of the most powerful and intelligent species in the galaxy, those who had long since left Earth in their rearview mirror. With each word, Zorek reaffirmed the belief that humanity was, at best, an oddity among the stars, a species destined to fail when faced with true adversity. As you can see, Zorek's hologram continued, the human race is a fragile one. Their only strength lies in their numbers, their ability to reproduce faster than the majority of the galaxy's species. But physically, they are weak. They lack the resilience of a Zarth or the sheer might of a karate warrior. The research station fell silent as Zorek paused for dramatic effect, no doubt relishing the ripple of disbelief and mockery his words had stirred among the audience. Sam's fists clenched at his sides, his frustration mounting with each passing second. We, the superior races, have long understood that strength is not just about intellect or numbers, Zorek's voice rang out, it is about physical power, the ability to survive against the most ruthless creatures the galaxy has to offer. The Zarth, for instance, are a perfect example. A species that is pure muscle, with instincts honed for hunting and dominating. Humans are nothing like that. Sam's breath hitched in his throat. The Zarth. The most terrifying predator in the galaxy. Massive creatures with armored scales and deadly claws. They were feared even by the most battle-hardened of alien races. And to Zorek, they were the very embodiment of strength. A murmur spread through the crowd, and Sam could feel the weight of their judgment. He could hear their thoughts even before they spoke them aloud. He's right. Humans are weak. They don't belong here. But Sam couldn't let it stand. Not today. Not after everything Earth had worked for. The anger simmering inside Sam began to boil over. Without thinking, he stepped forward, interrupting Zorek's lecture with an uncharacteristic outburst. You're wrong, Zorek, Sam's voice rang out, steady and filled with conviction. Humans may not be as big or as strong as some of the species out there, but we're capable of far more than you give us credit for. The room fell into a stunned silence. Sam could feel all eyes on him, the weight of every gaze, every judgment, pressing down on his shoulders. But he didn't falter. You speak of physical strength, Sam continued, but you forget something. We may not have the raw power of a Zarth, but we have something more valuable, intelligence. Resourcefulness. The ability to adapt and survive in the most hostile environments. You underestimate us, and that's where you'll make your mistake. Zorek's holographic image flickered momentarily, a smirk crossing his features. Oh? And how exactly do you intend to prove this, Sam Rook? Shall we send a human to fight a Zarth one-on-one? You might be willing to throw your life away for pride, but I do not believe the same can be said for your species. A dangerous silence settled over the room as Zorek's words hung in the air. Sam's heart raced, but his mind remained sharp. He could feel the eyes of the other alien scientists upon him, waiting for him to back down, to admit that Zorek was right. But he wouldn't. No, Sam said, his voice low but resolute. I'm not talking about throwing my life away. But I'll face a Zarth. I'll fight one. And I'll prove to you and everyone else here that humanity can stand up to anything. There was a stunned pause, the room collectively holding its breath. Then, a ripple of laughter broke out from the crowd. It was as if they were all waiting for Sam to falter, waiting for the human to realize how absurd his claim was. But Sam stood firm, his jaw set with determination. Zorek, however, was not amused. His hologram flickered again, his expression twisted with disdain. You truly believe you can defeat a Zarth? His voice lowered to a cold whisper. You're a fool. You'll die, Sam. But, If you insist, I'll give you your chance. The challenge was set. Tomorrow, Zorek's hologram announced. You will face Azarth. If you survive, I'll eat my words. If you don't, his voice trailed off, a cruel laugh following behind it. Well, let's just say you won't be the first human to perish under the claws of Azarth. The room buzzed with anticipation, but Sam's mind was already racing. His heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the realization that the next 24 hours would be the most important of his life. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Sam stayed behind, his thoughts a whirlwind of strategy and preparation. He would need more than just his physical strength to survive this. He would need every ounce of his intellect, every bit of his resourcefulness. He would have to rely on his mind more than his body to outsmart the beast. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his team, and a quiet resolve settled over him. This was it. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. He had to win. And with that thought, Sam Rook turned toward the door, preparing for the fight of his life. The sunless sky of Vexoria loomed ominously over the research station, casting long shadows over the barren landscape. The storm clouds that had roiled all night had finally passed, leaving the air thick with tension. Inside the station's training arena, the atmosphere was no less heavy, thick with anticipation, whispers, and the weight of a challenge that was nearly too absurd to consider. Sam stood in the middle of the massive, steel-walled chamber, his hands clenched tightly around the straps of his gear. His heart pounded, but his mind was razor-sharp, focused. The air hummed with the low vibration of the force field that surrounded the arena, a barrier strong enough to contain anything the Zarth could unleash, but not strong enough to guarantee Sam's survival. He could feel the eyes of the station's inhabitants on him, his team, the skeptical alien researchers, and, of course, Zorek, whose smug expression flickered in the corner of his vision through the hollow projector. Zorek wasn't even here in person, but the weight of his presence was enough to make Sam's skin crawl. The professor had underestimated him from the start. And now, Sam had only one option: survive. Remember, Sam, came the voice of his teammate, Dr. Lena Farrow, from the control booth above. The Zarth is not like anything you've faced. It's bigger than you, stronger, and relentless. Keep your head, and don't try to overpower it. You can't win that way. Sam gave her a brief nod, his jaw set. He wasn't here to overpower the beast, he was here to outthink it. He had no illusions about winning in a direct fight, but that wasn't the game he was playing. This was about survival, adaptability, and cunning. He would do what humans did best, turn the odds in their favor. The heavy door on the far side of the arena slid open with a hiss, and Sam's eyes narrowed. Through the haze of the distant storm outside, the shape of the Zarth appeared. It was a massive silhouette, its towering form barely visible through the darkness, but the outline alone was enough to send a shiver through his spine. The creature stepped into the light, and the full scale of it hit Sam with a crushing force. The Zarth was enormous, at least 10 feet tall, with muscular limbs, sharp talons, and scales that shimmered with a sickly green tint. Its face, dominated by a wide mouth full of jagged teeth, fixed on Sam with a gaze that felt like it could rip straight through his bones. Its eyes glowed, predatory and calculating, like it had hunted for centuries. Sam's breath hitched, but his resolve held firm. The beast growled low in its throat, its massive claws scraping the floor as it took a step forward. It was more than just an animal, it was a hunter, a natural-born killer. Sam could feel the weight of Zorek's challenge bearing down on him, but he couldn't afford fear. Not now. The gate behind him closed with a clang, sealing him inside the arena. The countdown began, and Sam steeled himself. 3 minutes, Dr. Farrow's voice echoed in his ear. Stay calm. Stay calm, Sam repeated to himself. He wasn't about to let this creature control the pace. The Zarth let out a rumbling roar, a sound that vibrated through Sam's chest and rattled his bones. It charged at him with blinding speed, its claws reaching out like a predator seizing its prey. Sam barely had time to react, dodging to the side just as the Zarth's claws slashed through the air, narrowly missing him. The impact from the creature's swipe sent a shockwave of air that nearly knocked Sam off his feet. He staggered, his heart racing, but he forced his legs to move, his instincts kicking in. The arena wasn't just a flat space, it was a series of elevated platforms, small obstacles designed to test balance and agility. Sam's mind raced, and he darted toward the nearest platform, knowing that the Zarth's sheer size would make it harder for it to climb or leap with precision. He'd learned everything he could about its behavior from the data they'd gathered over the last few weeks. The Zarth relied on its strength and speed, but it was not a thinking creature. Sam, on the other hand, had no choice but to think. He jumped onto the platform, taking a moment to steady himself before glancing back. The Zarth was already closing the gap, its roar shaking the air as it charged again, faster this time. Sam's breath quickened, but he focused. The platform beneath him was unstable, not built to withstand such a powerful beast, but it gave him height, gave him a chance. The Zarth reached the platform and swiped with its claws, but Sam had already leapt off, rolling to the ground just as the beast's massive claws raked the space he had been. He was on his feet in a heartbeat, scanning the environment for his next move. Trap it. Outlast it, he thought, moving quickly toward a pile of loose materials stacked near one of the arena's walls. A half-finished construction, meant to be a part of the research station, provided the perfect distraction. With a quick motion, Sam began pulling pieces of heavy metal sheets from the pile, making a trail that led back toward the center of the arena. He knew the Zarth was fast, but it was also instinctual. It would follow the easiest path, the one that looked like prey. It would be relentless, but not necessarily smart. The Zarth hesitated for a moment, its eyes darting between Sam and the debris he had laid out. Then, like a predator closing in on its kill, it moved toward the trail. Sam's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had one chance to make this work. Just as the Zarth lunged at the metal debris, Sam ducked behind a stack of crates, emerging from the shadows. He grabbed a piece of thick cable, coiling it in his hands like a whip. Timing was everything. The Zarth was focused, eyes locked on the objects in front of it. Its massive claws swiped at the debris, but Sam wasn't there. He moved in, circling the creature, his hands trembling slightly but steady. The metal cables snapped to life, his hands working quickly to tie them around the Zarth's legs as it advanced further into the trap. It roared in confusion, thrashing its massive body to and fro. Sam's heart raced, but he kept his focus. This was his moment. The creature's movements became more frantic, but Sam, using the last of his strength, pulled at the cables, binding the Zarth's legs and forcing it off balance. The beast crashed to the ground, its claws scraping at the surface in a frenzy to regain its footing. Sam stood panting, sweat pouring down his face. His body ached, but he wasn't done. Not yet. He had one final move left. Sam. Lena's voice broke through his earpiece, urgent. You've got it. Finish it. Sam didn't need any more encouragement. He rushed forward, using every last ounce of his energy to hold the Zarth in place. The beast was still thrashing, but Sam had already outsmarted it. As the Zarth struggled beneath him, Sam's final words echoed through the arena. This is humanity's strength. With that, he slammed the last piece of the trap into place, and the beast's movements slowed. The battle wasn't over, but the first step had been taken. Sam Rook had survived. The roar of the Zarth echoed through the arena, but it was different now, distorted, muffled, a creature trapped in its own fury. Sam's hands were slick with sweat, his breathing ragged, but his mind was clear. He had done it. The impossible had been achieved. The once mighty predator lay sprawled on the ground, its massive limbs bound by the thick metal cables Sam had managed to secure. The creature's claws scraped the ground in vain as it struggled against the restraint. Its snarls reverberated through the arena, but it had no more strength to tear free. It was trapped. Sam stood above the creature, panting, eyes wide with the exhilaration of survival. The reality of what he had accomplished was just beginning to settle in, but he couldn't let himself relax yet. The Zarth's strength had been formidable, but Sam had used its arrogance against it. It hadn't anticipated a human capable of thinking through the chaos, capable of outsmarting it. The crowd was silent. The air was thick with disbelief and awe. For a long moment, no one moved. The alien researchers who had once whispered about humanity's weakness now stood frozen, staring at Sam in utter astonishment. Zorek's mocking tone still echoed in Sam's mind, the professor's doubt lingering like a bitter taste in his mouth. Sam turned slowly, his gaze scanning the faces of those watching, finally locking onto the holoprojector displaying Zorek's expression. The professor's face was unreadable, a mask of cool disdain, until his eyes narrowed, and he spoke, his voice tinged with reluctant acknowledgement. "Well, I'll be damned," Zorek said, his voice sharp but quieter than before. "You've survived, human. You have proven that your kind can endure. But endurance alone is not victory." The words stung, but Sam held his ground. Zorek might be trying to downplay his success, but Sam didn't need the professor's approval. He had already won in ways Zorek couldn't yet understand. "Victory is not about survival alone, Zorek," Sam said, his voice steady but loud enough for the entire room to hear. "It's about proving that we have the ingenuity, the adaptability, to rise against any challenge. To show that strength isn't just brute force, but the ability to turn a situation to your advantage." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sam didn't care about their opinions anymore. He had done what no one expected, and that was enough. He stepped away from the Zarth, the creature's thrashing slowing to exhausted twitches. Sam's mind raced, quickly calculating his next move. The cables were tight, but the Zarth was far from defeated. The creature might not have the strength to break free, but it was still dangerous. "Lena," Sam said, his voice sharp through the comms. "Get the neutralizers ready. I need the Zarth sedated now." Lena's voice crackled through his earpiece, her tone tense. "Understood, Sam. Stand by." The Zarth's snarls were growing weaker now, its rage finally exhausted. Sam could see the shifting, unpredictable motions of the creature's massive body as it tried once more to free itself. But it was over. The predator was no longer in control. Sam's body ached from the tension of the fight, and his hands trembled with exhaustion, but he couldn't let his guard down. He watched the creature's movements carefully, his training kicking in. The predator's energy was depleting fast, and that was his opportunity. The seconds dragged by as Sam stood there, unwavering, watching the Zarth's final struggles. The creature's growls turned to a guttural wheeze. Then, without warning, its massive form collapsed, its breathing shallow and ragged. Lena's voice returned, sharp and clear. "The neutralizers are in place. It's done, Sam. The Zarth is sedated. You did it." Sam didn't respond at first. He was too focused on the moment, the silence that followed the battle, the weight of what he had accomplished settling over him like a cloak. He had won. Not with raw strength, but with the very thing Zorek had dismissed so easily, intellect. A soft beeping noise from the control booth snapped Sam back to reality. He turned, his muscles sore and stiff, and saw Lena descending from the observation platform, a look of awe on her face. She stopped beside him, her expression both proud and relieved. "Sam, I don't know how you pulled it off, but that was incredible. I've never seen anything like it." Sam gave her a weary smile, his voice low but confident. "It wasn't about beating it head-on. It was about knowing when to fight and when to survive. We don't always have the strength, but we have the brains to make it work." Lena laughed softly, shaking her head. "I guess we do. You really proved them wrong." As she spoke, the door at the far end of the arena opened, and Zorek strode in, his steps measured and slow. His expression was still unreadable, but there was no denying the flicker of respect in his eyes. "You've survived, Sam Rook," Zorek said, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. "I won't deny that. But let us be clear. The Zarth is one predator. The galaxy is full of others. You've proven your adaptability, but it doesn't change the fact that humanity is fragile." Sam held Zorek's gaze, his own eyes steely. "I never claimed humanity was invincible. But we're not as weak as you think. We may not have the brute force of a Zarth or the endurance of the karate, but we have something just as valuable, our will to survive. Zorek's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps you are right, Sam Rook. Perhaps you are right. Sam's chest tightened, not from fear but from something else, satisfaction. This was his victory. Not just for him, but for all of humanity. He had proved that they were not a species to be underestimated, not a race to be cast aside in the face of stronger foes. They might not be the biggest, or the fastest, or the most powerful, but they were resilient. And that resilience was enough to turn the tide. Zorek turned on his heel, dismissing Sam's victory with a flick of his wrist. But as he walked away, Sam knew the truth. He had won. The galaxy had been forced to acknowledge humanity's strength, not in power, but in intellect and survival. As the door closed behind the professor, Sam turned to Lena, his expression softening. We did it. Lena smiled. You did it, Sam. You proved the galaxy wrong. And in that moment, Sam knew one thing for sure: humanity's place in the galaxy would never again be questioned.